In the last 3 years, I've learned from over 100,000 Indigenous people and allies about the best ways for connecting with culture to feel happier, get what you want, whether it's knowledge, personal fulfillment, relationships, and connections. If you're new here, I'm Mallory, and I help people learn about Indigenous culture and how to use spiritual development to achieve resilience and happiness. For this video, I've put together the top 10 things that I've learned, and I can't wait to share them with you. If any of these are relevant to you or someone you know, please let me know in the comments. Before this episode starts, I have a small favor to ask from you. 89% of people who watch this channel don't subscribe. So if you've ever liked any of the videos we've posted, if you like this channel, can you please do me a quick favor and hit that subscribe button? It helps the channel more than you know, and the bigger the channel gets, the better we can together make an impact towards Indigenous truth and reconciliation. Thank you and enjoy this episode. The first thing that I've learned from Indigenous people and communities is no matter how it looks on the outside, imposter syndrome is very real and it's systemic. Now, what exactly is imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome is when you feel like an imposter. You feel like you don't recognize yourself and basically like you're living a lie. Now, why is imposter syndrome real and systemic for Indigenous people and communities? Colonization and residential schools and the impacts of generational traumas leading up to current day have resulted in many Indigenous people feeling like either they're not Indigenous enough compared to this stereotypical standard, whether it's Pocahontas or any other figure that you are comparing what Indigenous is supposed to be like. Imposter syndrome is systemic because colonization has impacted the way that society views Indigenous identity, views Indigenous communities, and it has impacted on an individual level for each Indigenous person and the associations and meanings assigned to Indigenous identity. Know that you're not alone and know that you're feeling that way because of the effects of generational trauma, colonization, residential schools. The history within Canada has caused this to happen, and you shouldn't blame yourself for feeling this way. You're not alone, and it can help you to accept that and be able to heal and deal with it knowing that you're not alone. If you're wanting to be a good Indigenous ally and support communities, understand the effects of imposter syndrome and how it can affect Indigenous people and communities so that you can be compassionate and know what that must feel like for them, so you approach conversations with grace and careful, respectful words and interactions. So let me know if this is relevant to you, if you've heard of this before, in the comments below. Now on to number 2. The second thing that I've learned from Indigenous people and communities is that tokenism prevents Indigenous people from self-identifying as Indigenous. Now, what exactly is tokenism? Tokenism means that you are essentially using something as a token to get something else, basically being used for representing something. So if in this case, most common case is if you are using an Indigenous person, whether it's a figure or a brand or a human being, to get something that you want, and you're not really appreciating or valuing that person, that brand, that spirit, and listening to that spirit or whatever you want to call it. Tokenism is not good, and it's very easy to feel this way if you are of Indigenous background and you're in groups or organizations where you're the only one, or when you're lonely and you don't feel appreciated or you don't feel heard, and maybe you're chosen for certain opportunities because of your Indigenous background. That is tokenism. Now, why does tokenism prevent Indigenous people from self-identifying? It doesn't feel very good. It actually is quite degrading and makes you feel awful. I've been through very many experiences like this where you are selected or given an opportunity or used essentially for your Indigenous identity. It doesn't feel good at all because you're not being valued or appreciated for your own value as an individual, and you're not being listened to or heard for your own individual thoughts and values and feelings that you hold personally. You're just being valued for that identity of being Indigenous. It's okay to talk about it, okay? I think that it's okay to talk about tokenism and allow non-Indigenous people in your life, or maybe there's someone in a leadership role or someone who has chosen you to be a token and they haven't quite understood how it impacts you mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I think it's really important as an Indigenous person to allow yourself, give yourself the strength to talk about it. And for non-Indigenous people, be aware that this exists and that it's very harmful. Now, how could this help you? Just be aware, everything starts with education. So learn and try to understand and listen and appreciate and treat people with respect and allow them to share and discuss their feelings and where they're at all times. That's the quickest and best way to understand, first and foremost, if someone feels like a token, is to talk about it. Have a conversation. It might be awful and uncomfortable, but you need to have it. As I try to believe that everyone has the best intentions possible. Speak up, represent, and support that person, because those small things might seem small, but they make a big difference. The third thing that I've learned from Indigenous people and communities is you might be a gatekeeper and not know it. Okay, this is a big one. Now, what exactly is gatekeeping? Gatekeeping is preventing anyone from doing anything. Okay, so if you are essentially putting up a gate and making something exclusive to certain people, that is gatekeeping. If you're setting requirements for people to participate and be involved in whatever activities that you are hosting or involved with, that's gatekeeping. It can be really damaging to people and also prevent them from accessing healing opportunities if you are a gatekeeper, right? People might be really in need of learning and healing using Indigenous culture and Indigenous spiritual practices that aren't going to be able to access those out of fear of gatekeepers, of something that someone said to them one time, right? So it's important to understand the effects of this and also to learn about why gatekeepers exist and the creation of gatekeepers, and allow it to not be this big dark thing that you don't know how to address, but understand it, learn about why it's created so that you can accept and unpack it and give it grace and allow it to be, and actually show compassion towards gatekeepers. So if you haven't heard about gatekeeping, want to learn more about it, you could watch this video right here to learn more and understand why gatekeeping exists. Okay? When you do cross paths with the gatekeeper, you're not completely shaken, you understand, and you're a little more prepared. So that's number 3. What do you think of that? Let me know in the comments. Now, the fourth thing that I've learned from Indigenous people and communities is that most racism is intercultural. Now, what exactly is intercultural racism? It's when you are racist or judgmental, stereotyping, discriminatory towards people that are of the same background as you. Now, why is most Indigenous racism intercultural? Well, it all stems from that identity crisis, right? So imposter syndrome, feeling not Indigenous enough, intergenerational trauma that makes us feel defensive, and we want to project those judgments and negativities on other people. That's where that intercultural racism really comes from, right? And many cultural backgrounds are this way. Indigenous people, Native Americans aren't special. It's very common. Anyone being racist or discriminatory is downright negative, and they must hate themselves or not like their life in order to be mean like that, right? So that's a good way that I try to approach racism in any form or judgment or anything like that. Understand that if you're an ally, that intercultural racism for Indigenous people exists very strongly, and just use that knowledge to help you to be a better ally when you're trying to support people and communities. And know that if you're identifying tension, or if you're identifying bad, negative feelings when you're interacting with an Indigenous community or engaging with anyone or talking to anyone, it might just be that, okay? It might just be understanding that there's those intercultural racism that can bring people down and make them in a bad mood. So that's the fourth thing that I've learned from Indigenous people and communities. Now, the fifth thing that I've learned is that allyship is a requirement for reconciliation. Allyship and being an Indigenous ally means that you support truth and reconciliation, you're of non-Indigenous background, you're settler identity, and you want to support Indigenous people and communities in learning about the culture, appreciating, respecting Indigenous cultural practices and teachings, and help to learn and come from a place of respect and support, and listen to issues, and just be a good person and be a good ally. So that's what an ally is. And if you want to learn more about becoming an Indigenous ally, you can click on this link right here or watch this video up here to learn about becoming an Indigenous ally. Allyship is a fundamental requirement. It's not just a nice to have, it is absolutely necessary. No truth and reconciliation can happen without allies and supporting allies. That is the answer, that's the key. You need to have allies in your corner to be able to support you when times get tough. Indigenous people on their own cannot accomplish truth and reconciliation. We wouldn't be where we were today if there weren't allies in place that are uplifting and supporting Indigenous voices, right? This means that if you're not supporting Indigenous allies, you need to start because it's really, really important, and build those relationships and support people and appreciate them for going out of their way and being an ally. It's really, really good. We love you, we're here for you, and just do your part by just keep doing what you're doing and know that you're appreciated, and join the ally movement. Okay, so the sixth thing that I've learned from Indigenous people and communities is that pain can trigger things to worsen or can inspire growth. It's up to you. What exactly do I mean by pain or triggers? What I mean is any pain or negative experiences, whether it's in your childhood or upbringings or day-to-day life, anything that doesn't go your way, that's causing you pain, that is a problem, any issues, but whether you choose to allow that issue to bring you down and make things worse for yourself, or whether you choose to use that pain and uncomfortable feeling to inspire you to change, inspire you to grow and be better, it's completely up to you, right? People that have awful experiences and have to overcome pain and trauma, depression, sadness, they have made the choice to use that as fuel to become more resilient, appreciate the good times, appreciate all of the things in their life that they're grateful for, and elevate their state of mind, their state of being, and channel positive energy and really use spiritual development to help them overcome those negative, painful experiences and use that as fuel to get what they want, to be happy, to be resilient, all those positive things. Choosing to use those pains to grow and to develop yourself spiritually, to reconnect and to embrace who you are is totally your choice. You need to do things like watching videos like this, immerse yourself in positive environments and positive experiences that can transform the way that you see the world and help you to grow and be a better person. The seventh thing that I've learned from Indigenous people and communities is that communities make transformations and growth, personal development and spiritual development sustainable. Now, what exactly are communities? I'm not necessarily talking about First Nation reserves or like friendship center communities or Indigenous nations specifically. I mean, any group of people is what I'm referring to in communities, okay? Now, why do communities and connections and relationships make these transformations sustainable? Well, I've been offering cultural awareness training, and the one thing that I have identified as a main determinant for success is people who fully immerse themselves in communities, connections, relationship building, and investing in their support system on their transformational journey. Being able to build relationships and have people that you can bounce your ideas off of, support you on your way, is the key to having a sustainable growth path, or to being able to continually show up for yourself and continue to build your resilience and to have a good transformation. And separating yourself from those groups could be detrimental to your success in achieving your goals. And also, on the flip side, being surrounded by communities or environments that aren't serving you well is going to do harm as well. So if you are someone who's an ally and you're wanting to support, understand that community-driven initiatives are really, really valuable, beneficial for you as an ally, and also for supporting your Indigenous counterparts too. Now on to number 8. The 8th thing that I've learned from Indigenous people and communities is that people expecting us to know our culture are deeply, deeply misinformed. If you expect someone who is of Indigenous background to naturally know the culture because they're Indigenous, that is misinformation, and that is just completely wrong, right? There's so many Indigenous people who have been disconnected, right? They haven't learned about their culture because of colonization and residential schools. They've been detached from their community and from their Indigenous cultural knowledge. So assuming or placing expectations that Indigenous people know certain things or that they have certain cultural knowledge or cultural values is not good. It's incorrect. Now, people sometimes expect us to know our cultural background because in so many other cultural backgrounds, people do, because they didn't have residential schools or colonization as extremely as Canada did. And it's natural and easy for you to make assumptions because it helps you to categorize information, and it's human nature, and it's totally okay. But now that you've heard this, try your best if you are an ally or if you are Indigenous and you're placing these expectations on yourself. I should know my culture, I should know these things. Try to remove those expectations because they're not realistic, right? They're incorrect expectations. The ninth thing that I've learned from Indigenous people and communities is healing generational trauma is a lifelong commitment. Now, what I mean by healing generational trauma is something that is rooted in our well-being so deeply that it somewhat makes us who we are. So if you don't know what I'm talking about by generational trauma, you can watch this video right here, which will give you some more further explanations of generational trauma. But healing that level of depth of trauma is very difficult, especially if you are someone who your parents or your grandparents attended residential schools or had very strong negative feelings towards their identity, right? There's a varying scale, a varying degree of how these traumatic impacts can affect you. Now, why is this a lifelong commitment? It's a lifelong commitment because healing is never done. Any type of healing is never done, right? We are continuing to grow, continuing to heal and change and evolve as people. So when there are continually triggers or moments that can come up that can affect you, that just means you need to always be committed to personal growth, to spiritual development, so that when those triggers, I wouldn't say if, but when those triggers do arise, you will be much more stronger and resilient and prepared to face them. Any healing journey is never finished. It's a continual process. If you know someone who this has impacted, or if this has impacted you personally, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Okay, now the 10th thing that I've learned from Indigenous people and communities is that it's necessary to build your tribe outside of your territory. For me, for example, I am a member of Curve Lake First Nation, and my territory is the Anishinaabe of Curve Lake First Nation. Now, beyond my territory, there are other nations, other communities, so many people that I can interact with, learn from, use as supports, and just have relationships with to support me on my learning journey and on my growth journey. Now, that applies to everyone, right? Now, the reason this is necessary is because just limiting your connections or your community to your home is limiting the people that you could potentially be exposed to or to support, or people that could help you, to just a fixed, finite, small group of people. If you expand your network and allow yourself to connect with people from any background or any nation across Turtle Island, it gives you so many more options and likelihood of connecting with people that can really help you and really get you, be really good supports for you on your path and all of those good things. Now, what this means is if you are an Indigenous person and your home community is not accepting you, or you're feeling a hole in your soul about not being welcomed home, or there being certain things missing from your home community, understand that that's okay. You likely have really big dreams and big passions and aspirations, and you maybe need to just expand your horizons to connect with people that are outside, and don't allow yourself to be limited to a smaller group of people. Yes, it's important and really nice to have that home base, but expanding the amount of people that you can interact with and learn from and have experiences with only increases the likelihood that you're going to find connections that are even more meaningful than the alternative of only having a smaller group. Okay, that's it for the 10 things that I've learned from Indigenous people and communities that I've interacted with in the last few years since starting the YouTube channel, and I'd love to know what your thoughts are with these 10 things. Are any of them surprising to you or strange? Love to know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and we'll see you next time.